What's up, fam? Um, so it's about close to midnight on Thursday. I have therapy, in like 11, like 9, 11, 9, 10 hours from now, and I'm thinking about trauma and triggers and baggage and and learning how to work through those things. I've experienced quite a bit of trauma in my life, mostly sexual and related to place of origin and mental, due to my mental health. And it has taken a long time to heal and um, not be imprisoned by these different traumas in my life. Um, I remember when the word trigger first entered my vocabulary about 6 years ago when I experienced sexual trauma, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I think I had heard about it and in my circles and with other people that I knew had also experienced trauma in their life. And I didn't want to like associate that word with myself. I didn't want to like make it part of my life. I didn't want to admit that that's what was happening to me. When I would smell a certain smell, songs or locations, a name, all of those things. But the truth is that my body would cringe and would tense up, as though I was about to go into fight mode or like flight mode, right? And what I've learned about my body and what I've learned about being of or being or having had experienced trauma is that your body remembers. Your body remembers what has happened to you, probably far after you have forgotten mentally. And us trauma, usually I feel, or from what I have experienced in my body, it gets stored in a different place than like your conscious. It stays in your subconscious. And so, if you've ever seen like a dog kind of like go through something that's scary or like something that's a shock to their system, they shake. They literally shake it off. And as human beings, and I think it's because we think too much that we have these big brains, we've lost the ability to like consciously shake off trauma. And so that trauma stays in your body, and usually when you're traumatized, you're re-traumatized. You just continue, and especially if you happen to live in less than ideal conditions. If you are low income or Black or Latino, marginalized group, any of the above, all of the above, you have a chance, or probably a higher chance, of living in an environment and living around people um, and having a lifestyle that will probably produce more trauma. That will probably put you in a state of anxiety and stress constantly. So what does that mean? It means that our bodies are carrying this stuff. Not to mention, we're also carrying intergenerational trauma, where you're carrying trauma that's being passed on from generation to generation. And with that trauma comes reactions and comes ways of being. Like if you look up PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, people who experience PTSD have a variety of different symptoms, and one of them is irritability, inability to trust, um, fear, anxiousness, um, tension. There's a whole gamut of a list. If you just Google PTSD, you come to realize that there are many people around us who exhibit these symptoms, and it is because living in this country, especially me, in the body that I live in the body that I inhabit as a Black Latina woman, I am in a body that has centuries of trauma that precede it, you know. And so being a black Latino or marginalized person in this world is stressful. It's a traumatic situation. It is trauma upon trauma upon trauma. So now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, I'm thinking about it specifically because in connection to traumas, I'm thinking about trauma in connection to triggers, because I learned from another dope homie that I have. I have a lot of dope homies. Another dope homie that I have, I was really in the throes of being in kind of like almost a constant state of being triggered after I graduated midwifery school and I came back to New York City. And he told me something really powerful that really has stayed with me. He was explaining to me how triggers exist or happen because your body and your psyche feel like that danger is happening again. And that often it can be hard to convince your body and convince your mind that what happened in the past is not happening again, you know? And so I've been thinking about that, especially because there's a lot of really new and wonderful things happening in my life that feel triggering, that feel like things that have happened to me before. And maybe those things are not necessarily traumatic, but they have left, their effect on me. And I think that's what's important about thinking about trauma and thinking about triggers. Triggers are just, like almost like a reflex, like a knee-jerk reaction, right? And we have the power to be able to really examine how and what will trigger us. Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it could be something that totally blindsides us. But it's kind of like following what I just said about like that, like you have to really be able to catch yourself to know that trigger is reacting to something from the past. That can really influence and affect how long you stay in that trigger, how long you stay reliving that trauma once again. I feel that I'm particularly thinking about it because I tend to think about the past a lot, more than I'd like to admit. But recently, I've been thinking about the past in more of a making peace with it, as opposed to revisiting it and wanting things to change, or wanting to change the past, which you can't do. I think that it's been more for me like closing loose ends and closing chapters for good when it comes to the contemplation that I've done. In therapy, I get to really be able to look at these past events and just my past in general, trauma or not, and analyze what is it about that particular moment in my life that has affected me. It's like I spoke about this before, when I was talking about Saturn return in my other video, about organizing, your life, and really looking at it in a way that makes sense. I think that it's gonna take a while to heal from what has happened, especially if you are like coming into consciousness and realizing what are the cycles and the patterns that you have to stop in your life. I think that that's what can be challenging, being patient with yourself and knowing that, you know, sifting through the sands of time in your life, right? And things that haven't happened in your life, can really feel painful, to have to relive that stuff. But what I try to remember is that it took, like, let's say it took 20 something years to create who I am. It may take about the same time to rewire and reprogram myself. Like, our brains and neurons and neurological pathways, they take on the behavior and the path and the formation, so to speak. Excuse me if I'm not being completely scientific. They take on the attitude and the shape and the essence of how your brain is constantly firing. So, like, for example, I used to suffer severely from anxiety. Now it's more of like, um, every once in a bit, it comes in waves. I wouldn't say that I suffer from anxiety anymore. I live with it from time to time. It's a visitor, it's a guest. It's not crippling in the way that it was before. And with that anxiety, and I have had to learn that my brain needed to catch up with the healing work that I was doing. In that my brain had gotten used to constantly firing and acting the same way to every single situation and everything in my life. And so it's like it's like I have to retrain and rewire. And the wonderful thing about the brain and these neurons is that it's incredibly resilient. You can heal yourself on that physical, mental level by kind of like, stopping the reactions in their tracks, right? Um, and that takes some work. Like I said, it took 20 years for my brain to be wired a certain way, and it's taking some time to do so, to change it, right? Um, I think what I have learned as well from another dope homie that I have, he told me that don't let yourself be pushed by your past, but pulled by your present. He told me, I think KRS-One said that, probably in a song or some video he saw. I don't remember. And that also really stuck with me. So as I do the healing work to recover from my past, from trauma, from having been mentally ill and working every day to be mentally well, I I don't want to be pushed by my past. I don't want that to be the only point of reference for me. I think that it's time, or it has been time, to really be really be pulled by who I envision myself becoming. I'm ever expanding and ever forming and ever becoming, and it will always be that. I don't I don't want to operate from a place of scarcity and lack. There are a lot of gems and a lot of richness in my past. I don't regret anything that's happened to me and anything that I've done. I don't want to carry that, and I don't think that we need to carry our baggage constantly. I think that there comes a point in time where you have to unpack that. And unpacking, just like when you move, or when you go on a trip or whatever, wherever you go, you have to pack something. Unpacking can be less than fun and ideal, right? But to be able to understand some of the things that I was talking about, like triggers, and understanding your triggers, understanding why you react to certain things a certain way, and why things, make you feel a certain way, because it's bringing back up this trauma or bringing back up the past situation, past person, past feeling. You know, the ways in which I have been able to heal constantly every day is understanding and analyzing and really looking at these things by unpacking them, you know, really unpacking them. And just like unpacking, just like when you move into a new place, unpacking means you can relax, right? Once everything is unpacked and everything is in its place, you can take a deep sigh of relief, you know. So that's the process that I'm in. And it's more of a joyful process than anything else. Because in that unpacking, I get to find myself, my true self, my truth. Um, as I unpacked painful things, I also unpacked things I thought I lost, you know, like my joy. I think that was probably one of the first things I unpacked, my joy. Um, my love for, I don't know, olives. I remembered that one while I was unpacking and getting to my true self. I freaking love olives. Um, you know, just finding gems of who my true and authentic self are. It is gems of who my authentic self is. Parts of my personality and parts of myself that I may have thought I lost. So the unpacking doesn't have to be unpleasant. The healing is going to be painful, but it doesn't have to be all crying and suffering either, you know. Because what I've discovered from my healing journey is that I can do this joyfully. There might be some days where I'm not so joyful and I'm a mess of tears and I'm not the best person, but I think that the more time I spend in joy and healing and really being aware of my triggers, and by virtue of being aware of my triggers, being, you know, protecting myself, and keeping myself safe from places and things that may exacerbate those triggers. So that's another thing, you know. The more I do that, the more I can be at peace and be in calm and be in a space to hold myself in love, you know, and hold myself in healing.